Angela Morris walked into the small-town courthouse that morning, with her head held high. She was dressed simply, in a modest dark blue dress and plain shoes, but there was a certain calm strength in her walk. People sitting on the benches in the hallway turned to look at her. Most of them did not know who she was, only that she had been brought in on some charge made by a local officer. In a town where the law often worked in favor of certain people and against others, it was not unusual to see someone singled out unfairly. Still, Angela carried herself with a quiet dignity that made it hard to ignore her presence. The case against her was small, almost laughable. Officer Daniels, one of the most feared men in the local police force, had claimed she disrespected him during a traffic stop. The truth was far different. She had simply asked him why he had pulled her over when she had broken no law. For that, he wrote her up, saying she had insulted him. In a fair system, such a complaint would never have reached a courtroom. But Daniels was known for using his badge to intimidate, and the judge of this small court often overlooked his behavior. As Angela sat down at the defendant's table, people whispered. Some pitied her, others shook their heads as if they had seen this play out before. Daniels stood tall and confident in his uniform, his chest puffed out like he owned the room. He smirked when his eyes landed on her. To him, she was just another person he could control, another example he could make to show the town his authority. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. The charges were read. Failure to comply with a lawful order, public disrespect toward an officer. It was thin, almost comical, but Daniels looked proud, as if he had caught a dangerous criminal. Angela did not argue or raise her voice. She spoke calmly when asked to respond, saying she had done nothing wrong. Her voice was clear, polite, and steady, and even the people in the back could hear her words. For a moment it seemed she might walk free, because it was obvious to many in the courtroom that the charge was weak. But Daniels was not satisfied with just dragging her to court. He wanted more. When the judge stepped out briefly to review documents, Daniels approached Angela in front of everyone. He began to mock her hair, saying loud enough for the room to hear that she should look more respectable. His words carried a sharp edge, not just mocking her appearance, but aiming at her very identity. The courtroom went quiet. Nobody stopped him. The other officers in the room looked away. Angela sat still, her hands folded, her face calm. Her silence seemed to annoy Daniels even more. He wanted a reaction. He wanted anger, tears, or shouting so that he could point and say, "See, she is out of control." When she did not give him what he wanted, he grew bolder. In a moment that would burn in the memory of everyone present, Daniels ordered her to have her head shaved. He claimed it was part of the procedure, though everyone knew it was nothing but an act of humiliation. The bailiff hesitated but followed Daniels' instruction. Slowly, clippers buzzed, and Angela's thick, beautiful hair fell to the floor. The sound of the clippers echoed in the silent courtroom. Some people looked down, ashamed to watch. Others could not look away, shocked that such cruelty was happening inside a courthouse, a place meant to represent fairness and justice. Angela did not resist. She did not cry. She kept her eyes straight ahead, her back upright, her expression calm. Her silence was not weakness, it was control. It unsettled Daniels. He expected her to break down, to plead, to scream, but she did none of that. When it was done, her head was bare, and yet she looked no less powerful. If anything, her dignity shone brighter. She sat there as if nothing had been taken from her. People who came expecting to see her crushed began to feel respect for her instead. Daniels, though, laughed loudly, hoping to cover the unease creeping into his chest. He spoke to the crowd, boasting about teaching a lesson. He wanted applause, but none came. People only whispered to each other, glancing between Angela and the officer. Something about the way she carried herself made them wonder if there was more to her story than they knew. As the judge returned, Angela rose slowly to her feet. She was asked again for her final words before the hearing closed. She looked around the courtroom, her eyes moving from the judge to the officer to the silent crowd. She spoke softly but clearly. The truth always finds its place. Today may not be the end, but it is not the end of me. Her words hung in the air, heavy and meaningful. Daniels rolled his eyes, dismissing them, but some people felt a shiver at the calm certainty in her voice. The session ended quickly after that. Angela was dismissed with a minor penalty. Nothing serious, but the damage had already been done. at least in the eyes of the crowd. Or so it seemed. Daniels felt triumphant as though he had won, while Angela walked out with her shaved head uncovered, her steps steady, her spirit unbroken. Onlookers couldn't stop whispering as she left. Who was this woman who endured such humiliation without breaking? Why did she carry herself with such calm strength? They had seen many people brought low in this courtroom, but never had they seen someone walk out with their dignity so firmly intact after being treated so cruelly. Even the bailiff, who had followed the order to shave her head, could not look her in the eyes as she passed. He felt shame, as though he had been part of something that would stain his conscience. Angela left the courthouse that day with the same quiet poise she had entered. To those who did not know her, she seemed like just another woman mistreated by the system. But to those who paid closer attention, she had revealed something unusual, an inner strength that could not be broken, no matter what was done to her outward appearance. And for Officer Daniels, though he smirked and laughed with his fellow officers after she left, deep inside he felt a flicker of unease he could not explain. Something about her silence, her calm eyes, and her final words made him restless, though he refused to admit it. He had no idea that the very woman he mocked would soon return to that same courtroom in a position he could never have imagined. That day, the crowd left with more questions than answers. Angela's shaved head was not a symbol of defeat. It was the beginning of something none of them could see yet. And as Daniels went home proud of his actions, unaware of the storm waiting ahead, the town itself began to sense that this story was not over. The courthouse incident stayed on everyone's mind for days. In a small town where nothing much usually happened, people couldn't stop talking about the woman who had walked out with her head shaved, but her dignity untouched. Some whispered in the market, some talked in the cafe, and some mentioned it quietly at their dinner tables. Everyone remembered how calmly she had spoken, and how her words had carried a weight far greater than her appearance. Angela Morris became the center of rumors. Some said she must be a teacher from the city. Others thought she was a lawyer testing the system. A few even claimed she might be related to powerful people in the government. Nobody knew the truth for sure, but her calmness in the face of humiliation made many suspect she was not an ordinary woman. Officer Daniels, on the other hand, carried himself like a man who had just won a great victory. He bragged to his friends in the bar, telling the story over and over. He laughed about how she looked when her hair fell to the ground. His buddies slapped him on the back and laughed along, though even they felt a shadow of doubt when they remembered her eyes. Daniels ignored that feeling. He liked being in control and didn't care about what others thought, but in private, things were not as simple. People who had witnessed the shaving began to feel uneasy. They wondered if they had stayed silent when they should have spoken. Some were afraid of Daniels, knowing his history of cruelty. Others simply tried to push the memory away. Still, whenever they remembered Angela's last words, the truth always finds its place. Their hearts felt heavy, as if something important was about to happen. Angela herself did not speak to the press, did not protest, and did not complain. She stayed quiet, going about her daily life with grace. But those who saw her walking in town noticed something striking. Even with her shaved head, she carried herself like someone with unshakable confidence. She looked people in the eyes, smiled politely, and never seemed ashamed. Children watched her curiously, while adults lowered their eyes, unsure how to react. Her calm silence made people curious. Who was she really? Why didn't she fight back that day? Why did she endure humiliation without resistance? The mystery only deepened when small details began to emerge. A clerk from the courthouse whispered to a friend that Angela had been seen reading legal documents with a deep focus. A librarian mentioned that she came to borrow books on law and justice. A teacher from the local school said she had overheard Angela speaking to children in a way that sounded like someone used to teaching or leading. One evening, in a small diner near the courthouse, a group of townsfolk gathered. They spoke in hushed tones about Angela. An elderly man who had once lived in the city leaned forward and said, "I know that woman. I've seen her before. She used to give speeches in the city about justice and fairness. She is no ordinary person." His words spread quickly. The rumor grew bigger. Some claimed she was a lawyer, others said she was a judge who had come here for reasons unknown. Daniels heard these whispers too, but he laughed them off. To him, she was just another target, and he was certain she would never rise to challenge him. Still, a tiny sliver of doubt scratched at the back of his mind. He pushed it away by drinking more and bragging louder. Meanwhile, Angela spent her days preparing quietly. She did not respond to the gossip, nor did she correct the rumors. She lived with patience, waiting for the right moment. Those who paid attention noticed she often carried a notebook where she wrote things down. She was always observing, always learning. She had the calmness of someone who knew more than she revealed. The town began to change in subtle ways. People who had once laughed at Daniel's cruelty now started questioning his actions. Some even began to avoid him. In the grocery store, mothers whispered about how wrong it had been to shave Angela's head. In the church, the pastor spoke carefully about justice and the importance of dignity. Daniels noticed the shift and grew frustrated. He shouted more at his officers, trying to prove he was still in control. But deep down, he sensed his grip on the town's respect was slipping. Angela's presence had planted a seed of doubt in everyone's hearts. Her silence was louder than any protest. The more Daniels boasted, the more people remembered her calm eyes. The more he laughed, the more they thought about her powerful words. It was as though the humiliation meant for her had instead exposed the cruelty in him. Late at night, Daniel sometimes found himself unable to sleep. He replayed the moment in the courtroom, expecting to feel triumphant, but instead he kept seeing her sitting tall, silent, unbroken. He tried to laugh it away, but her eyes haunted him. He didn't want to admit it, but he felt as if he had lost something that day, even though outwardly he had won. What neither Daniels nor the town knew was that Angela's story was just beginning. The courthouse event was not the end of her presence, it was only the opening chapter. Behind her silence was careful preparation, and behind her calmness was a strength that none of them could yet measure. The rumors grew, spreading beyond the town. A few people from nearby areas began to visit, curious about the woman who had endured humiliation with grace. Some even came to speak with her quietly, and those who did always left with the same feeling, respect. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were clear and wise, as if she was used to guiding others. Soon the courthouse was scheduled for another high-profile hearing. People whispered that Angela might appear again. Daniels laughed at the idea, saying he hoped she would so he could embarrass her once more. Yet deep inside, he was uneasy. He didn't know why, but something about her silence made him fear what was coming. And so the town waited. The story of a black woman humiliated in court was transforming into something larger, a story of dignity, patience, and hidden strength. Those who once ignored injustice now kept their eyes open, curious to see what role Angela would play next. Nobody knew the truth yet, but everyone felt it. Angela Morris was not finished. She was only beginning to show who she really was. The morning air felt heavy as people lined up outside the courthouse. Word had spread that a visiting judge would preside over the new docket, and the town was curious. Some came for the cases, many came for the whispers. They wanted to know if the woman who left with a shaved head and steady eyes would appear again. They wanted to see if there would be more to that quiet sentence she had spoken. The truth always finds its place. Inside, the courtroom lights washed the old wood in a pale glow. The clerk arranged files in neat piles. The court reporter checked her machine. The bailiff stood by the door, hands folded. Every sound was a little louder than usual, paper sliding, shoes tapping, low voices mixing like wind before a storm. Officer Daniels walked in with a swagger he had practiced for years. He greeted a few people, puffed out his chest, and took a seat where everyone could see him. He told himself the rumors were silly. He was still in control. He was always in control. The benches filled. A teacher sat next to a shopkeeper. A mechanic squeezed in with a nurse. The elderly man from the diner leaned forward, trying to see over the heads in front. Near the back, the bailiff who had held the clippers a week earlier stood still, his face tense. He had slept poorly since that day. He had not been forced. He had chosen to follow an order that did not feel right, and the choice weighed on him. The door to chambers was closed. A long minute passed. Then the bailiff stepped forward, his voice deep and formal. "All rise." The room stood, the wood floor creaking in one shared motion. The door opened. A black robe appeared first, then a familiar face. The shaved head caught the light, calm and clear like a silver moon. The quiet woman from last week walked to the bench. She did not hurry. She did not look around to measure the crowd's surprise. She simply moved with the same steady rhythm she had shown before, and she took her seat. The bailiff's voice did not shake, though his heart pounded. The court of the state is now in session, the Honorable Angela Morris presiding. For a heartbeat, everyone forgot to breathe. The sound that followed was not a gasp, but something softer, a wave of silence rolling from front to back. Faces changed as the truth settled. The woman they had watched endure a public insult was, in fact, the judge now holding the gavel. Officer Daniels did not move. His mouth opened a little. He blinked as if the lights had turned too bright. His arms tried to fold, then dropped, then tried again. The habit of control fought with the shock blooming in his chest. He felt as if the floor had shifted by an inch and his feet didn't know where to stand. Angela looked across the room. Her gaze was steady, but there was kindness in it. She nodded to the clerk. "Good morning." "Good morning, Your Honor," the clerk replied, voice small but warm. Angela turned to the court reporter. "Are you ready?" "Yes, Your Honor." She faced the room. "You may be seated." The crowd settled. A soft, nervous shuffle passed through the benches like a breeze through leaves. Angela placed both hands on the bench and spoke in a voice that carried to the corners without strain. "This is a court of law. This is a place for fairness, respect, and truth. We will handle each matter on today's docket with care. No one is above the rules. No one is beneath them. If you speak, speak the truth. If you listen, do so with respect." There was no anger in her tone. There was no tremor. The words were simple, and they held more weight because of that. People leaned forward. Some felt their eyes sting. A few pressed their palms together on their laps as if they were in church. Angela opened the first file. It was not about the events of last week. It was a zoning case, dull to most ears, but she treated it with the same attention she would give a serious trial. She asked gentle questions. She made sure both sides were heard. She explained the law in clear, plain speech. She took pauses to let people think. When she ruled, she spoke her reasons in full sentences, so that even the janitor in the last row could understand what the law required and why. By the time the second case began, the room felt different. People looked at each other with a quiet awe. This was not a show. This was work done with care. Something inside the courthouse seemed to stand a little straighter. Daniels kept stealing glances at the bench. He did not want to look and could not stop. The shaved head he had meant as an insult had become a crown of sorts. It made no sense to him, and yet it was happening before his eyes. He remembered the buzzing of the clippers, the laughter he had forced out of his throat to fill the silence. Now the laughter sounded wrong in his memory, as if it belonged to someone else who did not know what he was doing. During a brief recess, whispers rose again like steam. "She's a real judge?" someone said. "How?" asked another. An older woman at the aisle answered, "She has been a judge in the city for years. They rotate judges sometimes. After what happened, the district assigned her here for a period. The law is like that, slow to act, but when it does, it can surprise you." Angela returned. The bailiff called the room to order. The third file involved a small business dispute. Again she listened, guided, and decided with reasons that were easy to follow. A young clerk took notes so fast her pen squeaked. Then came a case where Officer Daniels was a witness. The clerk read the caption. The room tightened. Daniels stood and walked to the witness stand. For the first time that morning, the sound of his boots felt loud. He sat, placed his hand on the Bible, and took the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," he said, though his voice was not as smooth as usual. Angela watched him with the same calm gaze she gave everyone. There was no anger in her eyes. There was only attention. "Officer Daniels," she began evenly, "I will remind you, as I remind every witness, that truth lights the path in this room. Please answer each question clearly. If you do not understand, say so. If you do not remember, say so. But do not guess. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." The attorney started the questions. "Facts about a traffic stop. Times, distances, details," Daniels answered. And the more he did, the more he felt the steady framework of the judge's words around him. It was like standing in a room where every line was straight, and there was nowhere to hide a crooked edge. He told himself this was normal, that he had done this 100 times. But he felt the difference. The bench did not lean toward him. It did not lean away. It simply stood. At one point, the attorney asked about procedures. Daniels spoke quickly, trying to project confidence. The afternoon sun slid across the tall windows, laying slow rectangles of light on the courtroom floor. The morning had already changed the mood of the town, but the real shift began after lunch, when the cases grew more serious and the room filled again. Word had reached nearby streets and shops. The new judge was the same woman from last week. People wanted to see with their own eyes how she would handle the work, and how the officer who had mocked her would act under her calm gaze. They did not come for drama anymore. They came for clarity. Angela returned to the bench with the same steady walk. The bailiff, who had not slept well for days, stood straighter than he had in years. He called the room to order, and even the sound of his voice felt different, less automatic, more sincere. He had been thinking of his part in the shaving, the buzzing sound, the fallen hair, the way he had looked away from a person's pain. He had promised himself that if he was ever given a second chance to stand on the right side, he would take it. Now he focused on each duty with care, as if attention itself could start healing a wound. The next case involved a young man accused of a store theft. The owner sat on one side, the accused on the other. Angela did not let the room turn to rumor or rapid judgment. She spoke softly and asked clear questions. When did you first notice the missing item? What did you see? What do you remember about the time and place? She did not rush the answers. She watched the faces, not just the words. When the owner admitted the camera had not worked that day, Angela paused and explained gently why evidence matters. She did not embarrass anyone. She simply showed how the law protects both sides. In the end, the case was postponed for proper review, with an encouragement for the two sides to talk and see if there was another path that made sense. The crowd did not clap, but their eyes brightened. They could feel the difference between force and fairness. Then came a matter that circled closer to last week's storm. It was not yet a hearing about Officer Daniels's behavior. It was another traffic stop case, unrelated at first glance, but the moment his name was read as a witness, the room tightened again. He rose and walked toward the stand, shoulders rigid, chin lifted. He still wore the badge with the same shine, but it no longer controlled the air around him. The air felt owned by the rules, not by a person. He took the oath. He started to answer. Questions about the stop, what he saw, why he pulled the car over, what he said to the driver. Angela listened patiently and then asked a clarifying question about the department's written procedure. Officer, your policy manual requires you to record each stop with a body camera if the equipment is in working order. Was your body camera operating during this stop? Daniels shifted. It malfunctioned. Did you file a report about the malfunction? No. I intended to, Your Honor. Do you have any notes about the malfunction? Not yet, Your Honor. Her voice never rose. Thank you. Please continue, and focus on what you directly observed. The questions moved on. The attorney for the driver asked if the officer had raised his voice or used language that could be seen as disrespectful. Daniels denied it. The attorney then asked if there were any witnesses. Angela turned to the gallery and called one by name from the list. A grocery clerk stood and walked shyly to the stand. She spoke quietly, explaining that she had seen the stop from a bus shelter. She described the driver as calm and the officer as tense. She did not attack. She simply described. Her words were clear enough that even those in the back understood the tone of what she had seen. Angela thanked the witness. She looked back at Daniels. The law does not expect perfection, she said softly, but it expects honesty and care. When the record is thin, it is the court's duty to be cautious. We do no favors when we rush. The attorney for the driver made a motion to exclude certain statements. Angela explained the standard, then ruled carefully. She kept the focus on procedure, not on personality. In the process, the power in the room continued to move, from loudness to clarity, from habit to reason. During the next recess, something small but important happened. The bailiff approached Angela at the bench, not as a judge to be flattered, but as a person to be heard. He spoke in a low voice, requesting permission to make a statement on the record about last week. She considered, then nodded. When the room returned, the bailiff asked to speak briefly, and Angela allowed it, noting that it would be limited to his own actions and not a full hearing. He faced the courtroom, hands clasped. I followed an instruction last week that did not feel right, he said. I told myself it was my job to obey. I forgot that my job is also to protect dignity. I am sorry. I will cooperate with any review. No one clapped. No one booed. The apology fell like a drop of water on dry earth, quiet, but real. People exhaled. A woman in the second row wiped one cheek. Daniels looked away and stared at the flag. The clerk announced the next matter. A petition from a local attorney asking the court to appoint a neutral investigator to review courtroom practices and use of force. Behavior relating to defendant's treatment while in custody. It did not name any one officer. It asked for a method. It asked for light. Angela listened to the petition, then invited a response from the county's legal representative. The lawyer said the county took concerns seriously and would not oppose reasonable steps, but warned against rushing into public accusations without proper process. Angela nodded. "You are correct to ask for process," she said. "We will move with structure and with fairness to all." She outlined a careful plan. This court will issue an order requesting the district's administrative judge to assign an independent review officer. That person will collect records, body camera logs, booking photographs, and any written requests or complaints related to the treatment of defendants in this courthouse over the last year. Current cases will continue. The review will be separate and neutral. When findings are ready, this court will take them up in the open with notice to all parties. The room was so silent the hum of the lights could be heard. It was the sound of a system taking a breath. Not a spectacle, a step. Officer Daniels shifted again. He had not been named. He had not been shamed. Yet he felt the ground under his normal shortcuts turning solid, as if the old paths were closing. He remembered the camera he had not turned on, the report he had not filed, the words he had said and wished he had not. He felt the weight of a process that did not need anger to be strong. Another case began. This one, a landlord-tenant dispute about repairs and late rent. In the past, people might have tuned out. Not today. Angela spoke directly to both sides. She explained the law in simple terms, the kind that leave no fog. She told the landlord that safety repairs are not favors, they are duties. She told the tenant that rent is not optional. It is part of the promise they made. Then she did something, small and rare. She had the clerk print a short handout that listed local repair grants, mediation services, and a payment plan template. "Many problems are legal," she said, "but their solutions are human and practical. Use these tools first. Come back if you must." The two parties left with papers in their hands instead of only anger in their hearts. As the afternoon went on, the tone of the crowd kept changing. People came expecting to see a victory or a defeat. They found work. They found explanations. They found a judge who refused to trade kindness for strength or strength for kindness. Some of the younger people in the back began to whisper not about scandal, but about careers, about law school, about service, about what it means to hold rules in your hands and use them like tools instead of weapons. Near the end of the docket, a lawyer rose and asked in a careful voice whether the court intended to address the incident from last week, the one everyone in the room could see, even with eyes closed. Angela folded her hands. She met the lawyer's question without moving her gaze. "This court will not try that event in passing," she said. "It will be reviewed through the proper channel I have described. I will recuse from any matter in which I am personally involved. Another judge will handle it. That is how we keep the scale steady, by removing our own hands when they are too close to the weight." The words did not shout power. They made it. Power that holds itself still when it should. Power that knows where it ends and where the next duty begins. People nodded slowly. The lesson was not just for one officer. It was for everyone. When the final case concluded, Angela set the file aside and looked at the room the way a teacher looks at a class on the last day. A quiet check to see what had landed. "Court will stand in recess until tomorrow," she said. "Thank you for your attention and your patience. If you leave..." Morning light touched the courthouse steps like a gentle hand. The town felt different now. People did not rush to see a spectacle anymore. They came because they believed something honest was happening inside those walls. News had spread that the independent review officer had finished a report on how defendants were treated in the courthouse. It would be presented in open court. Angela had already said she would not hear any matter tied to her own experience, and another judge had been assigned for that portion. Still, she came early to handle the regular docket, to do the daily work that gives a court its shape. She walked in with quiet grace, greeted the staff, and set the tone for a day that would be clear and calm. The bailiff stood taller than before. The guilt he had carried since the shaving had turned into a promise to do better. He checked the doors, the microphones, and the seating with care. He greeted people kindly and helped an elderly woman find a seat in the front row. He felt that dignity grows one small action at a time. The clerk laid out copies of a brief summary of rights for defendants and witnesses. It was a new habit in this courtroom now. Put the basics where everyone can see them. The morning passed in the patient rhythm of real work. A business license appeal, a dispute over a fence line, a question about a fine and the ability to pay. Angela explained each ruling with reasons, and when she did not know something, she said so and asked for a brief recess to check the rule. Her humility did not make her smaller. It made the room stronger because it told everyone that truth matters more than pride. Near midday, the visiting judge arrived for the scheduled hearing on the review report. The room filled quickly but remained orderly. The visiting judge, a calm man with gray hair and a thoughtful voice, took the bench. Angela stepped aside, sitting quietly in the audience. She did not try to hide. She did not try to command the moment. She was simply present like any other citizen. The independent review officer, a careful person with a stack of files and a clear summary, stood and addressed the court. The report described procedures as they were written and procedures as they were actually practiced. It listed camera usage rates, booking logs, and any unusual actions taken in the courtroom over the last year. It spoke in plain terms. No harsh language, no speculation, just facts supported by records and interviews. The officer explained how, on the day of the shaving, there had been no lawful basis for that action. It had not been required by any rule. It had not been authorized by any judge. It had been an act outside procedure. People did not gasp. They listened. Many already knew it in their hearts. Still, hearing it spoken in clear words under the bright light of the law brought relief to the room. The bailiff lowered his head, then lifted it again, steady. The clerk blinked away tears and kept typing. The visiting judge thanked the officer for the clarity. Then came measured steps toward accountability. The visiting judge explained that the court did not run on anger. It ran on rules. He outlined the actions that would follow. A formal notice to the department about the findings. A recommendation for disciplinary review for any officer who had acted outside procedure, and immediate training requirements for all staff on dignity and rights, including courtroom conduct and use of equipment. He also asked the county to establish a simple form for complaints and for commendations, because truth includes both wrongs and rights, and the system should hear about both. When the name Officer Daniels was spoken in connection with the findings, the room stayed quiet. He stood at the counsel table, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the bench. The judge did not humiliate him. He did not raise his voice. He simply stated what the record showed. In several stops, the body camera had not been used without proper reporting. In the shaving incident, the action had no lawful basis, and in sworn testimony in a separate case, there were inconsistencies that required review. The judge ordered an immediate suspension from courtroom duties pending the department's internal process, with notice that any future appearance would be subject to strict conditions. He also ordered that any cases influenced by those actions be reevaluated by the prosecution and defense with the court's supervision. Daniels nodded once. The badge on his chest felt heavier than before. In his mind, scenes replayed. The bus shelter witness, the quiet strength of the judge he had tried to shame. The moment the clippers buzzed and silence filled the room like a warning he had not heard. He wanted to explain himself, to say he had meant to show control, not cruelty. But he could see now that control without respect always turns into something smaller. He did not speak. He listened. The visiting judge then did something important. He looked at the audience and spoke about the meaning of law. Rules are not there to protect the strong, he said gently. They are there to protect us all. When we fail, we do not fix it with louder voices. We fix it with better habits, clearer records, and open doors. He ordered that the summary of rights posted in this courtroom be posted in every courtroom in the county. He also requested a quarterly public report on camera usage and complaint resolution. It would not be a headline every time. It would be a record, the kind that builds trust slowly and then holds it. When the hearing closed, people stood not to cheer but to honor the moment. They left with printed forms and with a new understanding of process. In the hallway, conversation was soft and thoughtful. It was fair, someone said. It was careful, another replied. It felt human, said a third. Angela remained seated for a while after the judge left the bench. She looked around the nearly empty room. The light had moved across the floor and now rested on the first row of benches. The room felt at peace, not because a wrong had been erased, but because a path had been chosen and it was straight. The bailiff approached her, nervous, but resolved. "Your Honor," he said, "may I speak?" She turned and nodded kindly. "Of course. I cannot undo what I did," he said, "but I can promise what I will do now. I will speak up when something feels wrong. I will learn the rules I should have known by heart. And I will remember that every person here is a person first." Angela placed a hand over her chest, a simple gesture. "Thank you," she said. "Keep your promise in the small moments. The big ones will follow." He nodded, eyes bright. "Yes, Your Honor." Later that afternoon, the regular docket resumed with Angela back on the bench. The cases were ordinary again, as most cases are. A name change petition, a small claim about a broken fence, a request to adjust payment terms. Yet each matter seemed to shine a little more because the court had made the larger choice. Fairness with a backbone. At the end of the day, Angela addressed the room in a few short sentences that sounded like steady steps across a quiet bridge. "This court belongs to the people who walk into it," she said. "It is built on listening, proof, and respect. We will fail sometimes because we are human. When we fail, we will face it in the open and correct it with care, not with noise." She looked at the clerk, the reporter, the bailiff, the lawyers, the folks on the benches. "Thank you for your patience and your courage." Court adjourned. People left the building slower than usual, talking softly, carrying papers, carrying also a new sense of what a courthouse could be. Outside, the sky had turned the color of quiet water. Angela stepped onto the top stair and paused. A little girl held her mother's hand and stared up with curious eyes. The mother gave a small nod and the girl spoke. "Your hair is short," she said. Angela smiled. "Yes," she answered. "It will grow. Does it make you sad?" the girl asked. Angela thought for a moment, then shook her head gently. "No," she said. "It reminds me that what we lose on the outside does not change who we are on the inside. And sometimes a hard moment becomes a strong one." The girl squeezed her mother's hand and smiled back. "I like it," she said simply. "Thank you," Angela replied. They walked down the steps and the crowd parted not because they were afraid, but because they wanted to make space. Officer Daniels stood near the side entrance waiting for his supervisor. He watched Angela pass. He did not expect a word from her and none came. Respect did not require a scene. It required that he face the process he had once ignored. Days later, the department announced that Daniels would be removed from certain duties, required to complete training, and placed under close review for any future role. The announcement was plain, not cruel. It named responsibilities and explained the path forward. Some said the measures were not harsh enough. Others said they were fair. But in the courthouse, people understood that fairness is not about satisfying a mood. It is about building a standard that stays the same no matter who stands before it. The town kept changing in small ways. The cafe started offering free coffee to jurors on duty days. The library held a Know Your Rights hour where a volunteer attorney explained simple court terms. The school invited the clerk to speak to students about how records protect truth. A new kind of pride grew, quiet, shared, steady. As for Angela, she continued to do the daily work with the same simple care. She never told the story of that first day as a tale of her own strength. She spoke of the court, of process, of people who chose better actions. When asked by a reporter what she wanted the town to remember, she answered in a single line, "Dignity is not a gift from power. It is a duty we owe each other."